right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our May webinar on creating an impactful change message. Now, I know in the description we threw out there, if you're anything like me, sometimes when I sit down to write out whatever that change message is, I kind of forget everything in my brain and I sit down and I open up this Word document or this email and I start typing whatever that change message is, and then I'm like, delete, 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 and then I retype it and then I delete it all over again and then I start over. And I'm like, why can't this just be easier? And I was like, hey, you've got tools to do this. So why don't you share them with other people? Especially right now when we are dealing with situations where there is a lot of change going on in our environment. And sometimes we need to change around a little bit about how we craft that change message. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about this today. We're going to be going through a couple tools that you can immediately use to start thinking about how to craft that change message and how to put together that verbiage a little bit easier so we can cheat that curve a little bit, maybe take a little bit less time to put that message together and have it be a bit more impactful in these cases. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julie Miller, the president here at Joint Pivot. And Jen Tankenau, who is normally with us here today, she may be jumping on a little bit later. She was tied up with some other clients. So I'm flying solo today until she might jump in at a later date here or later time. So you're stuck with just me today. So we're going to be talking through our change management messages. As always, if you have questions as we're going through our webinar here, feel free to use the chat feature and ask us your questions as we go through the session. I'll be monitoring it on my own today, so I might be a little bit delayed in answering your questions, but feel free to throw them in there. I'll leave a little bit of time at the end so we can go through and address them. And as always, if you have questions afterwards, you can always feel free to shoot us an email and we are happy to answer those questions as well. So anyone who's registered automatically gets a copy of the recording that we're doing here today. And that comes right from my email address. So you'll have it right from me there as well. All right, so just our normal heads up for anybody new who's joining us here. And I know we've got a couple new people here today with us. Here at Joint Pivot, Jen Tankenau and I co-founded Joint Pivot back in October of 2019. And we do a lot of different work when it comes to continuous improvement. So really making sure that we are solving the root causes of the problem and then getting into organizations to help them learn these tools, teach them the tools, and be able to execute this on their own. So whether it's using our resources or us teaching yours, helping you get to the right opportunities in these cases and solving those issues. I think we've got myself here. We don't have Jen here today, but I am here with you in what is rainy Michigan today, which is good because we need a little bit of rain here. So I will welcome it here. And then just a reminder, we are out there doing strategic planning sessions, mapping sessions, value stream mapping sessions, change management. We're out there doing a lot of teaching and education right now, teaching others how to use these tools and speaking. Actually, yesterday I just got done speaking at the American Society of Quality Conference, which virtually this year, it was supposed to be, I believe, in Anaheim. So I'm sad I missed out on that. But we were able to do that virtually yesterday. So I love doing that type of speaking as well. So if you ever have the chance or you need somebody to come in and speak to any of your organizations or to your groups, let me know and I'm happy to do that. See what we can work out. All right, so let's jump into the change management issue that we're dealing with and how we create those communications. So the first thing I want to point out there is that change saturation is on the rise. So many of you know I am a trained ProSci change management train the trainer, and I follow the ProSci methodology. I love their change management methodology as well as Cotter's change management methodology as well, and kind of mix and match it where it seems to work best for our application. However, ProSci puts out this really, really great practice in change management best practices that culminates a whole bunch of different information and responses of surveys through all of the people who have gone through their training. So we get surveys every other year to be able to respond to. Now, this one was their 11th edition. I believe this was the data from 2019, so it's even a year old at this, or 2 years old at this point. And already before the pandemic, we consider change saturation to be on the rise. So 20% of respondents said that change management, that change saturation is at past the point of change saturation. Their organizations were. 25% of respondents said their organization is at the point of change saturation, and 28% said their organization was nearing the point of change saturation, which is a pretty significant amount. Now, again, like I said, this was before the pandemic and before we had a lot of massive changes during 2020 and 2021, which some of them are now starting to reverse themselves, with just because they're reversing themselves doesn't necessarily make that change go any easier. So we have to be cognizant of that when we are crafting our change management messages. Hey, look at that. There's Miss Jen Tankenow joining us. Welcome, Jen. Oh, you're still on mute, dear. There you go.
I didn't want to miss this. I apologize. I was stuck somewhere else, but I'm so excited for this presentation, so I had to join.
No problem. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are happy to have you here. So we were just talking about the fact that change management and change saturation is really on the rise, which really is why our messaging needs to be that much more impactful, because we're fighting with other changes at this point. We have people who are kind of at that max of the capability to be able to change. So we have to do an even better job above and beyond maybe where we thought we needed to be a few years ago. So this is why this is so super important, and why we have to do a little bit more work to make sure that our change management messages are effective and not just at the end of the change. We need to be more cognizant of the fact that our changes need to be communicated as they are happening, not just at the very end. So we've got to prep people a little bit more, give them a little bit more runway in these cases. All right, so I like to show this graph. It's actually the Kubler-Ross change curve, which ties in actually really well with the 3 phases of change from ProSci. So the 3 phases of change from ProSci are current state, which we're nice and snugly with what we are doing. We're happy usually with what we have. Even if the process isn't great, we know what to expect because we're in a routine. So even though we may not like it, we know it's a known factor in those cases. We know how to deal with some of the issues that pop up. Then we go into that transition state, and that's where that feeling is kind of unknown. No matter how well you are at dealing with change, there is always stress and anxiety that comes with this. So even if you're like, I love change, I have no problem with it, you're going to have a little bit of instant reaction of stress and anxiety because you don't know exactly what the outcomes are going to be. And then we've got that future state, which is where we are not quite sure if it's something we want to do because we don't know exactly what it looks like. It's our job as leaders, change leaders, to help be able to communicate whatever that vision is, to give people a little bit more comfort while they're in that transition state, to be able to go into that future state and be a little bit more willing. In those cases, your adoption rates could be a little bit higher the more we communicate what that looks like. And this ties out really well with the Kubler-Ross change curve, where we talk about stage 1 being endings, stage 2 being transitions, and stage 3 being those new beginnings. And many times as leaders, we watch people go through this change curve. And for some, in fact, I can probably plot this out onto the pandemic from last year, the different months I was going through each one of these stages of shock. And then we went into denial of like, okay, this really can't be happening. Like, this is going to be done in a month. It's fine. It's whatever. I can stay at home for 30 days. Fast forward a year later. Then we get into this acceptance of, yeah, it is fine. I can do this for a short period of time. And then I feel like I hit that like June timeframe, maybe July, where I was like, are you kidding me? Like, we are still in this? Like, this is so boring. And that is that depression stage. Then
Where
go ahead, Jen.
can I chime in?
Yeah.
My husband loved it. He loved the I don't have to be social and talk to
Oh,
people.
yeah. Love
Where
it.
I'm like, Andrew, no.
Yes, absolutely. I think, for me, I was probably the same as Andy, where I'm like, I love I joke that I'm like half feral now because it's been kind of wonderful being at home. But there were things that we couldn't do, like some of the training we wanted to be able to do in person that we were having to put on hold, that it just would have been better if we could have rolled it out or been able to do it in person. And I think that's where my depression came from, of not being able to do the things that we wanted to be able to do, or I don't really do well with being told what I can and cannot do. So there was definitely some depression that came from that,
Mhm.
for sure. Absolutely. So then we jump into that experimental phase where we're going to try a few new things. So that's where kind of we jumped out and said, okay, maybe we can do some virtual training. Maybe there's some virtual mapping we can do. And we kind of dipped our toe in the water. We knew we could do it, but some of our larger clients were like, I'm not sure. But then they were starting to realize, hey, this isn't ending anytime soon. And we can't just take a whole year off from this. So we jumped into it. And then we kind of make that decision to accept, and then we engage fully. And I compare that to one of my clients who said, all right, we are just going full all in on virtual. We are doing training for 200 some people virtually, and we are just going to go with it. And that's really what we call that engagement period. And it's worked out really, really well. Now, for us as leaders, change leaders, when we're looking at this, we have a tendency to jump out when we see people getting into this acceptance phase. So people go through shock, they go through denial, and then you start to see these little glimmers of hope of the fact that change is real and that people are starting to accept the changes. But acceptance does not equal engagement. And that's where we really have to dig in on some of these change communications to make sure that people continue to follow whatever this new process is. Because if we don't stay engaged and we don't continue to communicate at those points, we lose people in that depression area. And when they're in that depression and that experimental phase, that is where it is most important for us as leaders to be there to support them, to help teach them, to help engage them, to help make sure we're reinforcing and congratulating those changes and celebrating whatever it is that they're doing to help them foster and make that decision to move forward and really engage in the process moving forward. So, while it might feel tempting to step out at that point, just dig in until you get to the engagement point. Done.
What would it look like if I had team members in acceptance, not engagement?
Yeah, exactly. So this is where when we get into acceptance, you can almost kind of sense a mood of, I guess I have to do this. Like
Okay.
there is this feeling of I have to. Instead
Mhm.
of in the decision and engagement, it turns into an I get to do this. So if you were on with us in the engagement levels of energy, the
Mhm.
have to do it is like that 2, 3 level. And then that I get to do this is that 5, 6 level of energy in those cases.
Okay.
So really look towards if they're doing it because they have to do it or they're doing it now because they believe that that's what the new process is. So it's that kind of being told versus actually doing it on their own. Good question.
So
Yeah.
they're
So
showing up on time, they're giving ideas,
yes.
they're hopefully finding better ways
Yes.
versus like, oh, I'm here, just tell me what to do.
Yes. Exactly. Like is Lauren picking up her room because you're telling her to do it or is she picking up her room because she's made the decision and is engaged in the process?
Hmm.
We may
We're
not have
still in
gotten there yet.
acceptance.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So, what do we do with this? How do we figure out how do we communicate these messages? Because a lot of the times when we are creating change messages, one of the biggest mistakes we make is that we create our communication messages based on how we would want to be communicated to or what the issues are for us personally. And that's one of those things that I really want to challenge you not to do in these cases is I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the people that are changing, not in your own shoes, not how you would want to hear it, but what is the impact for the other people who are involved in this change? Because we likely have had some time to kick this around, to process it, to poke holes in it, to ask questions. Our people who are changing are probably hearing about it for the first time or are really not sure. They don't have all of the data that we have to be able to make this decision. So we really need to take a step back. Now, if you've been following along with us in all of our webinars over the last year and a half, you've heard us talk about kickoff documents. And we are going to be doing a webinar coming up on just kickoff documents, which will be great on how to create really awesome kickoff documents for problem statements, objective statements, so that when somebody asks you to formulate a couple sentences on what this project is and why you're doing it, you don't do what I do sometimes when I was younger and just start talking about all of the details. And 5 minutes later, people are disengaged. Kickoff documents can really help us make sure that we are fine tuning that message. And we use our kickoff documents to help craft our change management message. So our problem statement or opportunity statement that's out there really asks us to go through and paint the picture of the issue that we're dealing with. So this is one of those things that I want you to sit down and think about how long have we been experiencing this issue? what data do we have to support the reasons behind it? So if you could put some financial hours behind it, or some dollars behind it, or some risks behind it, this is where I want you to paint a picture of the change. So almost put your sales hat on and sell the pain associated with it. A really great problem statement in these cases, when I read it, I can feel the pain there right along with you. And I can paint the picture in my head as to what it is that you are experiencing. So go back, reference your problem statements or opportunity statements, or sometimes on our charter documents, we have grasping the current state, whatever it is that you have out there that explains the current state of the document. Dust that off, bring it into your change management communication, and use that as your starting point. Then I like people to use the objective statement. So this is where we are talking about what the goal of the project was or is, because sometimes we're doing these messages at the end of a project. Dust off that objective statement. The objective statement is really where we are laying out what we see happening when we're done. We're painting that vision for what could be at the end. So you think back to our three phases. Our current state was our problem or opportunity statement, and our future state is our objective statement in these cases. So that is where we were talking about what it could look like, what the impact is to the metric, and what is the financial impact of us doing it, and when do we want to have it done by. So there's a lot of good information that we can pull right from our objective statements to start crafting some of these communications. So if you have done these, this is a great spot to start. Dust those off, pull those into your communications, because why not use them? The other thing I will say on this is, as you were creating all this, if you've been using your tools that we've been talking about through all of our webinars as well, when you've done root cause on 5 whys, fish bones, process mapping, any of the pain points that you've identified, that is gold. Write that stuff down, go dust it off, write down who said it, and use that stuff in your crafting of your communication plans, because in those cases, you can specifically call back and say, hey, Jen, remember when you said you didn't like XYZ about this process? Well, we fixed it for you, and here's how we did it. And that
Mhm.
really shows people that you were listening as part of the process, and you're addressing the things that are impactful for them. So then I know that person might be more likely to adopt the changes that we're going, because I signaled them out directly, or I called them out directly in those cases and showed them what I was fixing.
And I just to add on the what Julie's talking about, the template that she has, the fill in the blank, the
Hmm.
thought process makes it so easy to walk through, and it prevents you from solutioning, and it
Oh,
prevents you
yeah.
from identifying root cause. So it's super cool. I did this recently with a healthcare company locally, and they were like, oh, I get it, and they were
Right?
excited to walk their people through it. And
Hmm.
don't come to me with solutions. Come to me with numbers and pain points and help me fill in the blank so we better understand the current situation. We're not just jumping to, solutions. So
Exactly.
I'm excited that you're going to be doing this at a future webinar.
Absolutely. It was one of those where I'm like, I can't hold that anymore. We need to share that with the world. It's really
Yes,
fun.
agree.
Good, good. All right. So the first of the templates that we have here today, of two that we have, is the first one to kind of gather our thoughts on what specifically is changing. Because sometimes we try and make our communications one size fits all, and that doesn't necessarily work. So this matrix will kind of help us walk through who are the different functions that have to change with respect to whatever process system it is that we're changing. And this could be function. It could also be by person. So let's say that you're incorporating some changes within maybe your team or your peer group. Instead of function, you might have specific people in those cases, because we might need to get down to that granularity. So this is where you're just going to list the function or the people down the side. And then for each of them, you are going to identify what the change looks like for that specific function or for that specific person. Just jot down a few notes. It could be, hey, nothing really changes for them. This is just how they're getting their information. The output of the previous process that comes to them might change or look or feel a little bit different, but it may not be that big of a deal to them. Or the change could be, it's a brand new interface that they're dealing with. They have to access a different system, and maybe their hours change, or maybe their job role changes. And that's where I want you to start thinking about it. So a lot of the value in completing these tools is just the conversations that happen around it and the space that you create to actually have the conversations to do an effective change plan. These communications are not something that you should just spend 5 minutes on and then shoot it out to the world. The more time you spend on this and the more space you dedicate to it, the better adoption rates you are going to have. So really carve out some time to help make some improvements here. Now, to prompt us through what actually might be changing, I put a couple of my favorite categories up there. So some of the categories come from ProSci, some of them come from me as to what I've experienced along the way of the things that I would like to be able to change. So what happens with respect to their processes, systems? What changes are happening because of the changes we are implementing? What is different about it? What changes in their job role or their job descriptions? Is there stuff that has to change with respect to that? That we are asking them to perform something differently or take on something that they weren't doing before that we need to address. If there's a reporting structure that changes, sometimes we don't think about how big of a deal the reporting structure can be because people might have different, like my husband actually has had a different leader. It feels like every 8 months he gets a new leader. And most people don't think that that's a big deal for him. And he's like, I have to rebuild a relationship every 8 months with my new leader. It's a big deal. It's different for people. So you don't know whether it's a big deal to them. You have to think about it for them if it's a big deal or not. What skills do they need? What training do we need to do to help bring them up to speed to be able to perform that change? What compensation might change? So, are there extra things that they're taking on that they might need to be compensated for in these cases? Um, does their work schedule change? Are they going into the office now? Are they working from home? Is it hybrid? What does that look like? Um, is there autonomy that's lost? This is a big one. Are they losing responsibility or are they losing the ability to make their own decisions? Are they gaining it? Think about that because if we're taking away choice on their side, that is something that we need to identify, even if it's a good thing. If we're taking away their ability to make a choice on something, that is something that we have to identify and communicate and be cognizant of. And then the last thing might be location. Those are the ones that I throw in there. It could be changing offices, it could be coming into work, could be remote. What does that look like in those cases? So these are just things that I go in and I jot down notes then as to what happens to each of those different groups. Now, when I look at this, if it's all the same for everybody, then I likely can create one communication to send out. If it's different, that's where you need to start thinking about making different communications for different groups or different people. You can have one broad communication that goes out to everybody, but then you're going to want some sort of plan that this leader sends out this follow up email. And maybe this leader has a one on one with this person, or this leader has in their weekly meeting these talking points that they're going over. So, again, could be that one main communication that goes out to the entire company, and then you've got some secondary communications that go in that start to address some of these specific changes. All right. Then one of my favorites here is the matrix that goes along with this. So this is what I use to craft emails, communications. This is my secret here that I use, and it's actually a mix of one of the ProSci matrices that we use and one of the matrices that I learned as part of IPAC in my coaching education as well. So we talk about what is the benefit or why we would do it, the desire part of it, if we're thinking about change management, or why personally we would want to do it and make that choice and what might be holding us back from the coaching side of this. So I like to go through and jot down what is the benefit. So why would I want to do this or why would we want to do this as a company? As for the company or for that function. So what are the good things about it? So kind of a pros cons list. What are the good things for the company? Then I need to jump down for the individual. So the person that we might be asking to change, not us again, but the person who we're asking to change, what are the benefits to them? Why would they want to do it? What's good for them? What's not good for them? That's where we're documenting out what the benefits would be. Then we jump over to the other side of this matrix that talks about the cost or the impact. And I say the cost because what's it costing us if we don't do this? What opportunities might we be losing? What are the risks associated with not doing it? What are the costs of those risks? So there could be things as a company or function that we would have to address in those cases. There also could be personal things that we need to address in those situations that we need to understand. So then I use this information then to start building out the draft of the communication. So some of this could be If we are telling a story, we're using the problem statement of, over the last 6 months, we've been experiencing XYZ, which has been costing us X amount of dollars or X amount of customers or lost profits in these areas. And we wanted to be able to fix that. So we put a team together to address that specific issue. Now, here's the changes that we're looking at rolling into place, and here's why we think they're a good thing. And that's where you start listing out the benefits to the company and then the benefits to the individuals. And then we say, we recognize that some of these changes might be big and they might be a little bit uncomfortable and they might be stressing us a little bit. And we got you on that. We feel you, but this is the cost of if we don't do this. So I realize this might be a bit of a stretch, but if we're not doing this, this is the risk to the company, or this could be the risk to us as individuals as to why this might not be a good thing. This can also help you craft out your one-on-one communications with your team members to help walk them through why the change might be good and might not be good as well, and to be able to identify those areas of resistance. So instead of opening up a blank Word document or a blank email and just trying to start crafting that message from scratch, the matrix is a really, really fantastic way for us to be able to do that. So I would highly recommend you utilize this. You'll get a PDF copy of this one specifically to just jot your notes down on. I don't really even use a template anymore. I just create a little grid on my piece of paper and I just start writing the stuff down so that I can better prepare myself in these cases. All right. So in a whole, this is where I really want you to just think about what these messages actually need to be. Practice identifying who it is that is impacted, what the issues are around that you're dealing with. Realize that change is the process. Everybody's change messages might need to be a little bit individualized because it's not one size fits all, and make it easy on yourself. Use the
Mhm.
matrix. Let the process guide you through creating the message. It does not have to be difficult. And if you have issues with this or if you need help, give us a call. I
Mhm.
can't tell you the amount of just one-on-one hours that we do. It doesn't have to even be a whole package. People call all the time and they're like, "Hey, can we just have you charge us for an hour and help us go through this change plan or just take another look at this communication?" Yes, yes, we can help you with that. So give us a call. We're happy to help you with that stuff. And I have to say, we've got a really fun webinar coming up here in June, our June webinar series. So Jen, would you like to talk to us a little bit about operational excellence and what's coming up in our June session?
Yes, absolutely, Julie. So we are partnering actually with Spark, which is an incubator accelerator for a lot of tech companies and other actually types of startups in town. And we were invited to create a 4-part series for them. And so that's going to be happening all summer, but we love the topic so much because our foundation truly is operational excellence.
Hmm.
A lot of people think of, oh, it's only manufacturing, it's only lean thinking. No, 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 no. This is for any company, any industry, any size, and at any maturity. And so we're going to be just introducing what is operational excellence, again, why it's valuable. We'll be planting seeds for future activities that we'll be sharing with people. And I'm very excited about it because this is like to me a solid foundation, and it doesn't have to be one size fits all. You use what works for your company, and obviously with our approach with Joint Pivot, we are flexible and we do what works. So I'm super excited to kind of just create some awareness
There you
for
go.
what operational excellence is and the value for any company.
Very good. You're always welcome to sign up on our website. Otherwise, there will be a link in the email I send out to you guys all as well with the recording to today's session, a copy of the presentation, and a copy of the template for you guys as well. So we hope you're to see your faces again in June when we start talking more about operational excellence. All right, any questions from anyone? You can feel free to throw them in the chat if you have them. Otherwise, you're welcome to follow up with us offline via email. You can certainly send your questions to us as well. If not, hopefully it's not raining where you are today and it's a little bit better weather. Although, like I said, we need the rain in these cases. And then reach out if you guys have any questions. We are here for
Mhm.
you. All right.
Absolutely.
Sounds good, everyone. Have a fantastic Wednesday. I jumped on a webinar yesterday. I said happy Wednesday to people. It was only Tuesday. Surprise. So
I
happy
thought today
Wednesday,
was
everyone.
Thursday.
Yeah, see, I don't know what it is about this week, but thanks everyone. Have a good week, and we will
Bye.
see you next month.